Good evening and welcome to today's meeting of the Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Howard Woollerton and I will be chairing the meeting in the absence of the Chairman, Councillor Eric Patten, who is on holiday, lucky chap. Today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are Councillors Dennis Pennyworth, Laura Coyle, Caroline Culver, Billy Drummond, Owen Jeffrey, Alan Macro and Stephanie Stevenson. We also have Parish Council representation on the committee. Councillor David Southgate, welcome. Simon Carey, independent member of Audit, is also in attendance. Parish Council's independent members and members on Zoom are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to propose, second or vote on the items. Nicola Thomas, Service Lead for Legal and Democratic, will be advising the meeting. Darius Zarazel is in attendance as the clerk of the meeting, and Sam Chiverton is the Zoom host. If we hear the evacuation alarm sounding, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by the trained officers present. Please follow any of their instructions. The assembly point is the car park at the Godolphin pub. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence were received from Councillor Eric Pattenden, Councillor Jeremy Cotton, who is substituted for Councillor Alan Macro, and Councillor Dominic Bowick, who is substituted by Councillor Dennis Pennyworth.
Thank you. We have two sets of minutes on the agenda, so we will vote on them separately. I therefore propose that the minutes of the meeting held on 29th April 2025 be signed as a correct record. Does any member have any questions on the... I'm sorry. I lost my place. Yeah. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you.
Chairman, beg your pardon, I've got some questions if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sorry, it's my first meeting, so forgive me if I ask anything that's not relevant. I noticed that there was a resolution to recommend that there should be 7 members of the scrutiny committees rather than 9. Can I just ask, does governance have an action log or a list of recommendations where it can go back and track what it's recommended and find out why its recommendations weren't heeded?
The minutes of the governance committee should detail the kind of discussion that led to that recommendation. And those recommendations are ordinarily referred to when they're going forward. And I'm just thinking on that particular one, I think it went to full council for consideration and they would have referenced the governance committee's recommendations, I think, just by hyperlinking to the minutes.
Okay.
I'm going from memory.
Yeah, sure. It was just whether you've got a log to go back and check what has actually been followed through on basically and why it hasn't.
Would you like to check and come back to you?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And then it also says an audit manager and committee members to meet without senior managers present. Is that something that's been followed up as well?
Which point are you on the minutes?
Page 3, I think.
I think I remember that, Chair. That was actually a offer from our audit manager and that was sent to the chair and obviously hasn't been actioned as of so far. I remember there was a bit of back and forth about whether members would find it valuable, considering that obviously we can talk in public as well. So I can have another follow up on that and see if the chair wants us to arrange something.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
With those 2 points noted, can we have a seconder? Councillor Jeffrey still? Thank you. And can we take a vote, please? Yep. Abstaining?
I wasn't present, Chairman. Abstain.
Noted. Can we therefore move on to the minutes of the meeting of the 15th May 2025? Can I have a proposal and a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey? Seconder? Second. And can we take a vote on that, please? Rest not present? Okay, perfect. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Any from the floor? Would officers or members like to propose any amendments to the forward plan? we are happy with that, the committee will note that. We will turn to the next item. Item 5 is the annual internal audit assurance report, and Julie Gillespie is going to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is something that comes through to committee every year and required as a council's equivalent to what's called Chief Audit Executive under my professional standards to report to those charged with governance, which is this committee, on an opinion on the effectiveness of the council's governance, risk management and internal audit control frameworks. Which in turn supports the annual governance statement, which is also being covered as part of this meeting. So it's an annual requirement, and the key message in the report is where I've given my assurance opinion and the executive summary. That's section 4.4. And point A, and I'm saying in point A that I conclude that reasonable assurance can be given that the governance, risk management and control frameworks remains robust. So that's the overall annual opinion that I'm giving. And the report then goes on and breaks down in detail and supporting information of the work that we've undertaken to come to that conclusion. So there's quite a bit of information there. It gives you a performance indicator of the team in 4.5 and the percentage of work undertaken. And then it goes through the actual, the reason for me to give an opinion and how I go about what work's been undertaken. And then further on into the report, it goes into detail on the number of audits that we've done, the conclusions reached for each of those pieces of work. And you will see on the tables, where on page 28, where it's giving the numbers of the reviews that we've undertaken, page 28 and 29, that there is a low number of either low opinions compared with those that were satisfactory or above, which helps support the opinion of the reasonable assurance. The rest of the report then gives an update on the last quarter of the year, because each quarter I give an update to committee. So this report gives an update as of the end of March and breaks down in detail the work that we completed for the last quarter. And there's a number of appendices which breaks down the information to support each of the conclusions that we've given on each piece of work. So it's whether anybody's got any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. If we go to page 27 and 5.10, Council's financial resilience continues to be a significant risk. Current situation resulting in exceptional financial support, funding being requested to assist with the 24-25 outturn, and help balance the balance sheet for subsequent financial years. Can you let us know what would happen if we still need EFS in the next financial year and it were not to be granted?
And what, sorry, that last bit meant?
What would happen, or what the situation would be if we still needed EFS, as in 510, in this coming financial year, and we didn't get it?
I think that would be out of my that would be a discussion for the Section 151 officer if we didn't receive the funding, as in how do we balance the budget? And also the external auditors would have a view on that. So I think their views, my work during the year it informs my opinion. I think there's decisions that will be made before that wouldn't, my work wouldn't necessarily support that, because those decisions would have been made anyway, if you see what I mean. Yeah, but if we don't get that funding, there's more to rather than an internal audit view. My views in retrospect, the work that we undertook for the year, I would obviously take that into account. If we didn't balance it, we have we're required to provide a balanced budget. So if we don't receive the funding, we would have other issues. And as I say, and the work that we do is retrospectively, but we would pick up, obviously, any issues with the funding situation deteriorating, changing.
Could I suggest, Councillor Jeffrey, that you might like to raise that later in the meeting when finance issues come up? I've got two very minor ones. 5.9, I assume you're now satisfied that the level of senior management vacancies being sorted out?
Yes, the vacancies have been recruited to. So that is still quite, some of it's still quite new and new. So it takes time to bed in as well. But yes, it's definitely going in the right direction.
And 5.2.9, I saw the word fraud or potential fraud, and it always concerns me dramatically.
5.2.9.
You're saying investigations, potential fraud, etc., and 29.
The days that were spent on it, the
Yeah.
unplanned days. So my team, we own the council's whistleblowing policy, and under that policy, if there was any internal or external allegations of potential fraud or potential wrongdoing or something that somebody's concerned about, they would come by my team. So that in brackets, I've put potential fraud because somebody might identify what they think's a wrongdoing. We'd investigate, and it wouldn't necessarily be fraud.
Nothing for us to worry about.
Well, I think further on down, I've got a section where I've covered, right, so section 5.3.1, I've mentioned there that the point C, there have been 2 investigations of potential fraud raised by a whistleblower. After initial investigation, in both cases, it was considered there's no evidence to support the allegations. So no, there's no big issue or that I'm aware of fraud allegations.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion.
Thank you, Chair. I think fraud is always a constant risk in any organisation. So to say that there's no fraud in any organisation is not true. Every organisation has an element of fraud happening. The key to it is making sure that you're controlling it, you're making it visible. And as I say, having a robust whistleblowing process, majority of frauds are identified through whistleblowers. And frauds are prevented by a robust internal control environment.
Thank you. That report was to note, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey.
The question that I wanted to ask was at 531C, has the whistleblower been victimised? Has the whistleblower walked completely free despite the fact that we didn't find any particular problem?
When you say walked away free, both of these cases were external whistleblowers, they weren't internal. And in both cases, there was an element of they had an issue. It's whether that issue was fraud or not. So I liaised with these people that have raised these issues and given the outcomes of the investigation. In one case, they gave me more information when I requested it. Neither of them were malicious or to create. So yeah, it was not malicious. There was a basis to the concerns they had. When I investigated, they were not fraud.
Simon Carey, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Julie, it's just in connection with paragraph 4.4b. There's the mention of continued corporate awareness of difficulties in recruiting and with plans for remedial action. Do we know what percentage of senior manager posts are vacant at the moment?
I couldn't quote it, but we are actually carrying out an audit of recruitment, effectiveness of recruitment processes at the moment to look at what we changed to try and improve the situation. But I don't know the percentage unless one of the councillors does.
Do we know what the plans are for remedial action? Is there a strategy in place, or is it being formulated?
But that's what we're auditing it at the moment. So we're looking at, well, yes, there are plans, and there have been for a number of years, actually. It's not new. It's just that we're looking at how effective they're being, compared with the vacancy rate that we did have, what is it now, and just looking at how effective those processes are that we put in place.
Just finally, does the council use external recruitment consultants, or have they ever considered using them to fill senior vacancies? Are you aware of that? Is anyone aware of that?
Councillor Cottingham to come in.
I will do so
vigorously.
Yeah, so earlier this evening I was in the leader's office, and on the wall he has the organisational chart of all the senior positions. And I think the top 15, we've just made an offer last week. I think we've probably got 1 out of 15 potentially vacant. So there's been a major recruitment drive to fill the top table, the senior leadership team within West Berkshire Council. And yes, we do engage with external recruitment agents to identify candidates, which then we get through and we then sort through the CVs. So from a recruitment perspective, it has been a major operational activity within the leadership of West Berkshire Council, and I think we're just about filled all of the top 15 vacancies positions on the CLT.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on one of the heat maps on page 48. System security, firewall, antivirus, traffic management. I'm rather surprised that the impact is not higher. The impact is kind of between 3 and 4. And I would have thought that if we have a cyber attack, for example, it could have a much more dramatic effect than that.
These are after the controls have been applied, so that this is after the audit work and our assessment after the controls. Yeah, that's the which actual table was it? The
48. What's the next one down?
the system security one. It's bearing in mind what the because if there's no controls in place, this would all be all red. It's the controls have mitigated it to bring it down to, and the audit opinion wasn't. We weren't concerned about the audit opinion.
So I think I'll be saying then, because of mitigation,
Yes.
the impact will be less than it could possibly be.
Yes, because if we didn't have any controls whatsoever in an area like system security firewalls, the impact and the likelihood would be all red.
Thank you.
So yes, yeah. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Macro. So what Julie is saying is that there'll be various preventative controls, things like penetration testing, us evaluating our own firewalls, etc. I do know from personal experience we do have a very strong view on preventative controls. Our systems are not exposed to the outside world, but as you quite rightly identify, one small hole, as we've seen with the likes of Marks and Spencers, with Co-op, can have a huge dramatic impact on the organisation, not least from a ransomware perspective. There's a recent case study of a haulage business up, I think in the Midlands, 500 staff went bust because all their systems were locked and they didn't pay the ransomware, and basically that business folded overnight. And we are, as an organisation, do hugely rely on IT to service everything which we do. And from a transformation perspective, artificial intelligence, etc., we will be spending more of our resources in the AI data analytics world to improve our own effectiveness and efficiency as an organisation. But you're quite right to identify this as a major risk for an organisation such as ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It mentions a few items in corporate systems as having limited assurance and being unsatisfactory. Are you able to give us a bit more detail on what those areas are, please?
Where have you picked that up from, sorry?
I've got here pages 28 and 29.
So they are 28 and 29. So they give the summary. This annual report gives a summary of numbers for each quarter. When I come to committee, I break down on there on the appendices. So each quarter, previously, those with limited assurance would have come to committee, and I'd have given details in the committee report. I could say that again each year in total, but if committee wanted me to. Yeah. But I do come back each quarter and break down the limited assurance and the key reasons why.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple more questions, if I may, Chairman. Which one was I going to go for next? Apologies. Yeah, with regard to, I know there's a lot of centralisation of services going on at the moment. I think we're bringing together some finance and procurement and commissioning and contracts and so on. Have we done a piece of work around the risk that might be associated with that? Presumably we're doing it to make efficiencies, but have we also looked at the risks? Because I think this exercise has gone backwards and forwards over the years a couple of times.
I'm not I'm not in the loop to know about that to undertake the risk assessment. Senior managers are responsible for the risks, so they should have it on their risk registers of all these changes. I'm aware there is some centralisation. I'm not involved in any discussions about the risks involved, or so I don't know. That's sort of outside my remit, but it should be on risk registers.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back afterwards with some more questions if I may, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is on Appendix D, please, reference 1.8. So we're talking about a thing called Aggresso, and it says the current process considered unwieldy and time-consuming. Again, this functionality will be considered as an issue within the Aggresso system upgrade. So my question is, why was Aggresso ever chosen? Why are we still using it? And is it actually fit for purpose?
At one stage it would have been fit for purpose. Some of the things that we're picking up now, whether we could have factored that in and changed it over the years anyway, because just because you've got a system does not mean you can't make changes yourself. I think it's because of this upgrade was imminent that it wasn't worthwhile considering doing that to the old version. You can always amend versions to something, or usually to tailor something to your own requirements if it is cost effective to do that. I would say if they weren't updating Aggresso, we'd have recommended they did this to the previous version.
So may I ask then, once you've done the upgrade, you're going to look at it afresh, and if you feel then, having upgraded it, that it is no better, some serious consideration will be given to replacing it?
Yeah, we would need to consider what the changes were. But like I said, with software, you can make changes, even though it's something that you bought, that you can make changes and report changes to your own requirements. So we'd need to reconsider to what degree that any changes met our recommendation, and did we still have any significant concerns, and then consider what's the best way of dealing with them. So I couldn't say one way or another, but if we had concerns, I mean, this is quite a large corporate system, the accounts receivable. So if we still had concerns, we would have to think, the new system hasn't addressed them, what else are we going to do?
I'm so glad you're here, Councillor Collier.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for your question. So try not to get too technical. So from any accounting system, we have what we call the primary ledger, i.e. the general ledger. Then you have interfaces with what we call the secondary ledgers, i.e. accounts receivable. We've talked previously about the housing benefits secondary ledger not interfacing correctly. This is probably a question of an interface between the main general ledger and the secondary ledger, and the fact that we have developed our own systems over the years to making sure that they are properly compatible with the new release of Aggresso. Aggresso we're moving to a cloud-based function. And it's one of the things which we're looking to strengthen is the governance of making sure that any secondary ledgers which are bolted onto the main system do talk properly, do have the appropriate controls, the appropriate interfaces. So as Julie's indicated, that sometimes we're having to do manual workarounds because they're not talking properly, which then can potentially lead to error, omission, etc. So it is more of a wider question of the governance of projects. And moving on what Councillor Culver asked previously, lessons learned. So one of the lessons learned, which we're taking from a risk register perspective, was the recent upgrade of iTrent, of making sure that the project management was properly executed with the relevant risk matrices in place, and making sure we have the appropriate level of risks identified when the project is rolled out. So there are a number of lessons which I think iTrent has gone to scrutiny or will be coming to scrutiny.
Through you, Chair. We have a task and finish group looking at project management, and iTrent is one of the things
One of
we'll
the
look at.
things. So
Yeah.
there were quite significant lessons learned through iTrent and its selection and implementation, which we've taken on board as an authority.
Councillor Calvert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I wanted to ask a few questions. Obviously, we've looked at the recruitment of senior managers, and it's good that we've got people in permanent places now. But with regard to other issues around personnel, we discussed at the last scrutiny meeting about the fact that the average sickness rate is 10 days per year, which seems fairly high. I don't know whether that compares well or badly to other authorities. I'd also like to ask, have we looked at issues like exit interviews as a means of getting feedback from people when they leave, and incorporating that into our assessment about risk? And also fire and rehire. I have contacted the chairman of personnel and also the leader about this. I'm aware there are still some instances where people are waiting to sign or not sign a fire and rehire agreement. And at least one of those people is a single point of failure for the council. So I just wondered, when it comes to personnel related issues, do we actually look at that in detail as a risk?
When I put the audit plan together, I review the risks across the council. Risks I'm already aware of, if there's a change in profile of risk, and because of the recruitment issues over the last couple of years, not just for senior managers, but across the board, it is on the audit plan. It was on the audit plan just at the end of last year. We're auditing at the moment, which is what I was just saying, we're carrying out an audit of recruitment and retention. The nitty-gritty of day-to-day processes, but also what's our strategic approach to improving the situation. So that should cover some of the things that you're talking about. More wide personnel issues, unless there's a risk that I've identified and it's in the audit plan, we wouldn't. I don't cover risk, operational risk on a day-to-day basis like that. That would be more to do with the managers, the service managers. And HR should be in risk registers. They were the starting point, and I use risk registers to help inform the audit plan of the work where the key risks are.
Thank you very much for that. And just a final question, if I may, Chairman. I'm conscious at the moment that South and Vale are looking at a new waste contract, and they're going to appoint someone soon ready for a July 2026 start. We're obviously looking at merging with them, and I think our Veolia contract is going to take us up to 2032. So that's just one example. Are we looking ahead to that potential merger? Obviously, we don't know whether it will go ahead or not. And looking at the risks associated with various contracts that the different authorities have got. Thank you.
Interesting point. I would say again, I'm not in the loop for what's happening with local government reorganisation to that degree to know that. But the managers that are involved, it should be on the risk register. Those sorts of things, when I review the audit plan, and if there's issues of concern and these key risks, we would then put them in the audit plan. I mean, local government reorganisation, whatever's decided, there will then need to be a plan of action, and working towards that deadline, and internal audit work would focus on some of that to make sure how prepared are we? Can we meet the deadlines? Can we provide the data? But at the moment, it's early stages and audit work isn't involved at this stage.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Southgate, you've been waiting very patiently. I'm sorry. Councillor Southgate, you've been waiting very patiently.
Good evening. If I look at section 529, if that's okay, that's the table of planned time and actual time and so forth. I was wondering actually if there was another metric here, which is actually the available resource you had. You talk about you had 5 members within the audit team.
Mm-hmm.
So if you actually worked out from those that were actually available and not off, being a trained apprentice and so forth, what would the actual total number of available hours you would have? The reason for this question really is to see whether you're being given an impossible task against your plan, or actually the efficiency is one where there may be some future improvement. So does that kind of make sense?
That it does, and it's a very valid question. I think I have actually covered something in the report about the 80% target. It's been, oh yes, I have. Has been in place for a number of years. And I still think it's reasonable because when I benchmark on the number of what I call of available days, we are quite high as a team. So I do break down the 5 people in the team, take away leave entitlement, take away an element for training, take away an element of general meetings, and whatever's left is what we class as productive time, and that's what the audit plan figure, the 760, is based on.
Okay.
So that's what it's based on. That could come to committee. I'm fine for that to come to committee. But that will in its own right will look reasonable to you, but you would not know how reasonable it is without benchmarking it. And I have benchmarked it, and we're at the higher end of the number of days that we think per person, a full-time person per year after leave and general contingencies is 180 days, which is quite a lot. That's why the 80% is reasonable. If I reduce that 180 days to something more average, which could be 160 days, then that would be an easier target. Then you could argue we should have 85 and 90% as an annual target. You see what I mean? The two are linked. And the 80% in its own right does seem, you think, well, push yourself, it could be 85, 90, but that would be really pushing it because we've already got a high number of days per person or reasonably high. You know, it's not unachievable, otherwise we would never achieve it each year, and we do, but that's because we're actually quite an experienced team. But it's not an easy target where we are at the moment, but I'm happy to provide that breakdown each year if committee want it. It's a table that gives you number of people, total days, training, and then breaks down the actual days at the bottom.
I mean, I don't think you need the detail, just what that sum total comes to, yeah? Which is the
Comes to on here, the 760, the total days,
Yeah.
that is what it comes to.
Okay, fine. That was the clarification. That was the clarification I was after. The only other point I'd make is that the box below that table, where it refers to the efficiency of 86% referred to in 5.22. I think if you go up, you will discover it's actually 5.23.
It is. Apologies.
So
You're right.
it was,
You're right. Yes, it is.
okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any further questions?
No, thank you.
If not, this report is for to note only, so we can. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey.
Please forgive me. I did have one other question, if I've not lost it. If you go to page 36, Garland now Burfield Common Federation, overall opinion weak. And my question is, what action do we take? Or is this all down to the education service?
When we have a week audit report, we would go back and follow it up. If at the point of follow-up it is unsatisfactory progress, it would depend how concerned we are, whether we want to do a second stage follow-up or not. Some is borderline, in which case it is then down to the schools to take remedial action, the relevant remedial action.
So in effect, this is a wake-up call to the school, unless we're very, very concerned.
Yes. But also we would then plan another audit and we risk assess the schools, the frequency we visit the schools. So if it was unsatisfactory, we would bring forward the time frame for their next review as well.
If we're all done, we'll just note that report and move on to item 6, which is the annual Treasury Management Review, which is being presented, I believe, now by Elizabeth Griffiths. Assuming she's on.
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, this is the annual Treasury Management Review for 24-25. Worth drawing the committee's attention to the fact that this reports on the financial year just finished, and it assures the committee that we've complied with the investment and borrowing strategy and the prudential indicators that were published for that year, and the committee is asked to note the report.
Question from members. I think Councillor Stevenson beat you marginally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask something about page 63, which lists the authority's borrowings? On line 1, it states that a Public Works Loan Board loan was taken out back in 1996 with the high interest rate of 8.38%. And on line 2, one taken out later that same year for the interest rate of 8%. So my question is, why cannot these loans be paid off first to get rid of the high interest liabilities? I note that they're not even due to mature until 2056.
I'm just sorry, is that page 63 of the report on the table marked Appendix
Yes,
A?
page 63. Thank you.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm just scanning down to find the particular. Okay, so I can see that one of the loans is 3.2 million, the other is 666,000. So the PWLB typically has reasonably high penalties for early redemption. So I haven't been involved in the particular calculation of these, but I would imagine, knowing David and Shale and the team and how carefully they manage these, that they would have actually calculated what the cost of early redemption was versus the cost of continuing with the loan, and that would have been an assessment that they made. But if I'm quite happy to take that question back to the team and ask them to reassure the committee that those early redemption versus continuing with the loans calculations are done.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Calver.
Excuse me. At 4.5 on page 54, we have a net loans requirement, a liquidity allowance, and a liability benchmark. Please forgive me. I absolutely, literally do not comprehend any one of those.
Nice.
Well, the good news is that this is a prudential indicator as defined by SIPFA. So basically, what it's trying to do is to give you a sort of indication of where you're heading in the future. But I would agree with you. My background, I've got to confess, is private sector, and I do find them somewhat bewildering sometimes. So your CFR is your the outside of your borrowing requirement. So it's basically everything that you have spent on capital and everything that you are projecting to spend on capital. So that gives you a sort of a limit of how much you are allowed to borrow. And of course, you've got your sort of authorised limit sitting outside that as a warning line, but your CFR is effectively what you're allowed to borrow. And that you'll have dealt with through both internal and external borrowing up to this point. Then it talks about your balance sheet resources, which is what you've got available as sort of, I guess, working capital, you might want to call it. And that takes you down to what it thinks you're going to have to borrow, plus a little bit of allowance for liquidity. And I'm looking at Ed Mills from KPMG here because he's far more technically adept at explaining these things than I am. Does that just about cover it, Ed?
Yeah, I would say so. Capital financing requirement, yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
I think that's as good as I can get my head around it.
You're not alone, trust me on that.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. On 5.16, can you explain what an operational boundary is, please? It says it's 5.89%. I was just wondering, is that a healthy figure?
Sorry, give me the paragraph reference again, please.
5.16.
Page 58. .16. I do have to apologise. I am scanning this and I will answer you quite quickly, but I've sort of taken on this meeting at the last minute, and so I'm still getting up to speed with some of the papers. Yes, so the idea is
what we just talked about. There's the CFR, which is what you are allowed to borrow, but we set limits below and above that. So we're setting a limit that's a sort of trigger level that tells you when you're getting close to what you're allowed to borrow. And when we do the Treasury Management Strategy each year, along with the budget, the council gets the opportunity to vote on these thresholds, and they are designed to, I guess, it puts a limit on what officers are allowed to do without going back to the council to ask for additional permission. So the council sets those limits when they're voting through the budget, and the officers then have to manage within those limits. And this paper is saying that we have kept within those limits.
Right, thank you. I've got a couple more questions, if I may, Chairman. 5.31, it talks about how there's nothing earmarked in reserves for maintenance of property. I'm conscious that we are trying to sell some of our properties, and if we don't maintain them, that might undermine their value ultimately. So, I mean, this might be a question for Councillor Cottingham, because I know we've talked about this at scrutiny before. So what would the impact of that be potentially if we're not maintaining those buildings properly?
Chair, would you like me to answer that? Or did you want to go to Councillor Cottingham?
If you'd like to answer, that'd be fine.
Okay, so in terms of the property portfolio, each individual property, in terms of looking at as a saleable asset, is reviewed on an individual basis. So you're looking at that property, because you have to remember as well that each commercial property that we have, if it's actually a good commercial property, then it's actually yielding a revenue benefit to us. So the property might be worth £4 million at sale, but if that is actually generating a £300,000 a year rental, then that £300,000 a year is contributing towards our revenue budget requirements. So each property has to be looked at on an individual basis as to whether it's actually the right decision or not to dispose of it. And you're looking at the Treasury Management Strategy here. If you've got a building that's, and I'm not going to do the numbers in my head because I'll just get them wrong, but basically there's what you would sell the property for, what that's going to yield you in terms of offsetting capital financing costs and interest that's payable, versus what that property is generating in rental. And if that property is generating more in rental than it would save you in capital financing costs, then you'd have to think twice about selling it. And those properties, you would also factor in your maintenance costs, any cost to upgrade your EPC come 2030, when you're expecting those leases to expire, all of those kind of things. So each property that we're looking at would be taken on an individual basis. That there is a capital budget available on a sort of ad hoc basis for the repair of properties, and the Capital and Assets Group considers those scheduled repairs, and that's managed by the property team. But you're right, we don't have a specific earmarked reserve set aside for maintaining those properties. But I'm sorry, it's a slightly long-winded answer. I think I'm saying it's on an individual basis. You would look at a property and say, is this worth actually investing in and repairing, or is it one that we need to dispose of? And if we do need to dispose of it, then you would be looking at the repairs, but you'd be looking at dilapidation costs, what the likely next use of it is, what its attractiveness is on the market, and you would make a decision, much as the same as you would if you were selling your house. You would have a look at your house and you would decide what it was worth investing money in order to get an increased sale price, and what it wasn't worth doing because actually you wouldn't recoup it.
Thank you.
Can I help you as well, Councillor Cove? As I sit on the Property Investment Board, all the buildings are let on what's called field repairing and insuring leases. So at the moment, the tenants are responsible for all repairs until the lease expires or there's a break clause.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, and Cottingham's hand. Sorry, and then I've got one more question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, so there is the I suppose from an accounting perspective, to look at each individual property and what the contribution is making, but there's also other risks which we've debated at length regarding, is it the sort of investment strategy we want to be a commercial buy-to-let landlord? Quite right to say that we've got a number of leases which are coming to potentially to be renewed. And there are a number of properties which, if we were to get new tenants, we would have to seriously think about reinvesting, redesigning these commercial properties. So yes, it is the prudent way to have a sinking fund to across the entire portfolio when, as I say, leases come to be renegotiated, and also if a tenant was to break the lease. Luckily, at the moment, we have around about 99.9% rent paid. We have one small property which is we're having a bit of an issue with, but it is very, very small as a risk exposure. But yeah, it is trying to manage the potential risk of future revenue streams, along with the strategy as we pass with the council of disposal in the short term. But obviously, we have to make sure the price is right. It's not a case of disposing at any cost.
Thank you. I've got one more question, sorry, Chair, if I may. When it comes to comparing our borrowing with the income that we get from investment, I think it's referred to as gearing. Do we have a target, you know, that we shouldn't go above a certain level of gearing? What impact does that have on people who might lend to us in the future? Would they look at that measurement?
So I must confess, I don't know what was published in the Treasury Management Strategy, which if there was a target that we were being held to, it would have been in that Treasury Management Strategy. I would say in terms of income generating investments versus loans, again, you're looking at that balance. You're looking at kind of what's it going to cost you to borrow today versus what are you earning on those investments. And it's usually unlikely that what you're earning in investments is a higher rate than what you would borrow at, because then people would just borrow to invest. That's what you'd do. But a lot of what the Treasury Management team do is manage things through in the short term. So if you've got a particular blip of a few £1 million, and I know a few £1 million doesn't sound like a blip, but in the context of what the team are managing it is, if you're looking at that, you would try and find a way to manage around it rather than going out and taking an additional loan for several million if it's only going to last 48 hours or 3 days. And so they do have an amount of money. Normally they're maintaining round about the 10 million mark, which if you look at the sort of MiFID II requirements to make us a professional investor and give us access to particular financial instruments, we do have to maintain a level of 10 million pounds. So we normally have roughly a working capital balance of about 10 million pounds in various money market funds that are quick access, and we would use those to manage through sort of very short-term blips. But yeah, it would be about that kind of like, what can I invest it at versus what can I borrow at? And that's what you would use to sort of temper kind of how much you've got sitting in working capital versus the long-term loans that you're taking out.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm just wondering, though, what impact that has on on lenders. You know, are they going to be put off if our gearing's particularly bad? Thank you.
I don't believe so. Most of the borrowing that we do is either through PWLB or through peer-to-peer borrowing. So you're talking about borrowing from councils who would completely understand the situation that you're in, because they're in the same sector and they're for the most part in the same situation, and they might only be putting out £6 million. I realise it sounds like I'm tossing great big numbers around, but in the context of our overall borrowing, again, really not. So, you know, a council might get a huge amount of its council tax in quite early in the year if people are paying up in advance. And so it might have a significant amount of cash, but only for 4 months. So it might be quite happy to go out and give you a loan at a relatively low rate, but it's still higher than what they might earn in the bank for a 4-month period and get it back. And they'll feel more confident lending peer to peer and dealing with other councils. So in that case, those councils are going to be in a similar situation. They're going to understand, and I don't believe they'd be put off. And then the other borrower, main borrower we can have, and you can see it from the tables there, would be the PWLB itself. Again, sector specific. So no, it's only my personal opinion, but no, I don't believe that they would be put off.
Simon Carey, I can see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Elizabeth, just a quick one, and it's for clarity mainly. On page 54, the table at 4.4. You got that?
Yes.
Yeah. The figure in the bottom right corner, the actual net borrowings for 24-25 is 259,376. Does that include the actual net borrowings for 23-24, i.e. the 241,506 amount, or are they two separate amounts?
Oh, it'll be a cumulative position.
Right.
So basically it's building year on year.
Yeah, it's not two separate loans. That's
No. So it looks like the net borrowings at the end of 23-24. Oh, we've got, oh, sorry. Yeah. Net borrowings at the end of 23-24, 241 million. We projected that at the end of 24-25, it was going to be 210, but actually it was 259 by the time we got there.
Thank you. That's great.
Could I ask a quick couple of ones as well? On 5.9, do we have any comparisons to other similar unitaries?
Chair, do you mean in terms of overall borrowing?
I mean, they're big numbers, and I've no idea whether they're good, bad, or indifferent.
Well, I can't tell you off the top of my head benchmarks to everyone, but I was previously the Exec Director of Resources in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, and that had a very similar level of borrowing, and it's a sort of similar-ish sized unitary.
I can see Councillor Cottingham's coming to rescue yet again.
Thank you, Chair. I think the very simplistic way of looking at this is that if you take the total borrowing, divide it by the number of residents in your local authority, so roughly 160,000 people in West Berkshire, that roughly works out about £1,600 per borrowing per resident. There are numerous of other authorities are in the £2,000 to £3,000 per head. So I think we're very much in the middle of the pack, and there are benchmarking statistics which come out from central government. So one of the questions was asked was, are we borrowing too much? And we have within the report showing that we can borrow up over 300 million. So there is a definite level of headroom which we have from what we can borrow. It is all a question, is it affordable? And we've talked earlier about how we borrow, long-term, short-term. One of the key metrics which we have is the weighted average cost of borrowing, which is currently just below 4%. And we also have other metrics of making sure that our short-term borrowing is no more than 30% of total borrowing. Just last week, we had the Treasury Management Committee, so last Thursday, where we went through quite a lot of detail of making sure that we're complying with our own metrics from a constitution perspective. But as I say, one of the things which we look at is what is the weighted average cost of borrowing. At the moment, it's just below 4%.
Finally, for me, a very quick one, the PFI liability on Padworth. I think it comes to an end in 2032, I think I heard earlier. Is that correct? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I obviously don't know.
Could someone just let me know, some stage? Thank you. Sorry? Oh, Elizabeth, you have your hand up again, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I would agree, and it's about the affordability of the loans, and I think in terms of this committee, what we're looking at is the governance of the loans. So we're asking, have we complied with everything that we should? And the answer is yes, we have. I think in terms of the scale of the borrowing, it's regardless of how efficiently we manage to borrow, the reality is that we are an organisation that's in EFS. We do have a budget gap to close, and the amount of interest that we're paying on our capital that we've borrowed is a pressure on our revenue budget.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Macro and then Councillor Doyle.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, on commercial property, 526, it says that the value is reduced by approximately £1 million, which is something I'm not terribly happy about. There's two questions really. One is why you haven't been moved faster to reduce our exposure to the commercial property market, and in particular the filling station, because one would imagine with the move to electric vehicles, the future revenue for petrol stations is liable to reduce. And the second thing is, what effect is that reduction of nearly £1 million having on our finances?
Thank you. So the answer to both those questions, I can't tell you about the past. I can't tell you about decisions that were taken in the past. I wasn't here. What I would say is that it's, again, I'm going to go back to, I do this a lot. I always bring the examples back to kind of what you've got at home, because that's, I think, what people understand. It's like selling your house. Your house might have a nominal value, but at the end of the day, all you can get for it is what someone is willing to offer you for it. So when these valuations are done at the end of each year, they are looking at the attractiveness to the market of the properties in question. And that changes as the mood in the market changes, as macroeconomic factors change, as industries and sectors move, as you've pointed out. So just because if we had sold a petrol station a couple of years ago, any buyer who was looking at it would have been looking at, if they weren't just looking at the plot of land and what they were going to do with it, they would have been looking at the long-term profitability, because that tends to be what drives the price. If you've got a property that's in reasonably good condition, has a good tenant in it, and that tenant is paying a good solid rent and is likely to stay and to keep meeting that rent, that property will inherently be worth more to anyone who's looking to buy it than something that doesn't meet those criteria. So I think the reality is, if you could predict that there was going to be some kind of shift in the market, so if you can get in early on an area that's developing, then you could get a good deal or sell something for better than you expected, because those other factors would have shifted, and other people wouldn't have realized it, and they might have paid you a different price for it. But generally, when people are coming and looking at things, they'll do their due diligence. They're looking to see, what can I make from this in the future? And that dictates the price. So even if we held the petrol station, for example, on our books at a higher price previously, if that had already taken a tumble in value, just because that hadn't been recognised in the year-end valuations, doesn't mean we would have got any different price for it. It would have been whatever the market dictated when we went out. And as to what that does to our financial stability, actually all of these revaluations are taken to a revaluation reserve. So that doesn't actually impact us year on year in terms of, we report the accurate balance sheet value, but the difference between that and the purchase price, be it up or down, is taken to a revaluation reserve.
Thank you.
Councillor Coyle?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I think that my question might end up having been partially answered, but I'm not sure, because it was in the same section as Councillor Macro with when it talks about paragraphs 5.30 and 5.31. Again, this is about the risks in relation to the value of investments changing, and also it talks at 5.30 about the other risks associated with commercial property. Then 5.31 says that the risks have historically been managed through the allocation of general fund transfers to the earmarked reserve, and it goes on to say that that's not been happening because of the overall reserve position. I just wondered what is then happening to manage that risk. I mean, I guess one of the things is that we're reducing our overall portfolio, but is there something else that is? I'm sure there is. I just wondered what it is, because we're not doing the thing we used to do, if that makes sense.
Again, I might have to take that away and ask for a more full answer to be given to you, Councillor Coyle, because I wasn't here when they set the budget. But I mean, we are a council that's in EFS. We are struggling to close our budget gap. So all of these things, to create provisions for things, creating provisions is just putting money aside for a rainy day. And so, again, always come back to what you would do at home. At home, if you had surplus cash, you could put that aside against risks, against eventualities, against something breaking. If you don't have the available cash, you don't have it to put away. So there you might have to just kind of accept that you are carrying a risk because you don't have sufficient spare revenue to put aside to mitigate it in the way that you perhaps previously did when you had more surplus revenue.
Aren't you pleased you decide to attend?
Yeah,
Councillor
I
Cottingham?
am very pleased. So, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the questions from previous councillors on the property portfolio valuation. Yes, there has been a revaluation downwards of £1 million, but to reassure all residents, that £1 million does not take a hit to the general fund reserve. So this is not a revenue pressure. We're not having to find £1 million worth of savings, £1 million worth of cuts to frontline services. This is just a bookkeeping exercise. Because this activity is not directly attributable to council tax revenue, this, as I say, is not a pressure which we face as a council. So I want to reassure residents we're not having to find £1 million to plug this gap.
Any other questions? Councillor Macro again.
Moving on to the directly owned properties in the section 528, there's been quite a change in valuation of some of these properties. So, for example, the Shore Social Club has increased in value from £70,000 to £219,000. And the Bloomfield Hatch Farm in Graiseley has gone down from over £1 million to 485,000. I was wondering why those valuations have changed so much.
That I'm afraid I would have to go back and ask the property team to provide more information on.
Thank you.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. I think for Shore Social Club, this is probably the insurance valuation which we have to be carrying to if the community centre was to, God forbid, something happened to it, what is the replacement cost? So again, typically these valuations are shown on the balance sheet as being either from a commercial perspective. I would deem again the Graiseley farm, the fact that it's been earmarked for a solar farm, so the actual valuation from a farm, from an arable land perspective, has probably been reduced, and also to buy that land is probably cheaper, as I say, for a solar farm. And I say for social club, my assumption is that's probably the rebuild cost of the asset.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, as per the recommendation in the report, it is requested that the committee approve the annual Treasury Management Report for 2024-25 and note that the Council's plans comply with the investment and borrowing strategy and the prudential Treasury indicators for the period. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Stevenson, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you very much. Can I ask members to vote by raising their hand? Do they agree with the motion? Thank you. That brings us on to item 7, which is financial statements 2024-25, highlights and going concern assessment. And again, Elizabeth Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. This very much is just is a report for noting. It's to draw the committee's attention to some key highlights from the financial statements, and also it lays out the rationale for why we believe that the council is still a going concern and should be reported as such in the financial statements.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Cowell, then Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much indeed. are we content? It says here that our net assets profile remains healthy and it's consistent with the previous financial year. Are we confident that we will be able to meet all of our obligations as they fall due? And also, am I correct in thinking this is a management view of whether we're a going concern? Has this been run past auditors as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. I can see Ed shaking his head. So I'm going to answer no to the second part of your question. But I know that this is prepared as a statement, as a management view, yes, but as a statement on management's view of why the council should still be considered as a going concern. So yes, the fact that we are saying that we are means that we do believe that we can meet our liabilities. I think we've just looked at the sort of Treasury report. So from a cash perspective, we still have plenty of headroom. We know that we are supported currently by exceptional financial support from MHCLG, and we do have a reasonably healthy balance sheet of assets. So we believe that we are still a going concern and should be judged as such.
Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got several questions on this section, if I may. The first one is about EFS, the financial support. On page 71, it tells us that the government will monitor the council's effectiveness in utilising the funds provided. So my question is, I wonder how the government decides a council's effectiveness in utilising funds. Whereas I understand it, we have very little leeway in choosing how to spend the money. Most of it's allocated or mandatory. So how will the government monitor this effectiveness, please?
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. So we do have to report back to MHCLG on regular intervals to talk about our progress. We do have to project to MHCLG how much exceptional financial support we believe we will need. And then MHCLG will also be looking to see how well we stick to those plans. And then I think all of those sort of aspects that we've sort of talked about previously, like kind of, what are we doing about not just the level of debt that we're servicing, but are we looking at the right decisions in terms of taking on more debt? So when we're looking at our future capital programme, how much are we planning to borrow on top of what we've already got in order to fund that? We will be talking to organisations like SIPFA, who work hand in hand with MHCLG, and apologies, I should have broken down that acronym if you're not familiar. That's the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountants, and that's the accounting framework that we operate within as local government, and they work hand in hand with MHCLG. That's the Ministry of Housing, Local Communities Government, I think, MHCLG, get their acronym right. Yes, and so they will be talking to us about things like our plans for our capital assets, our commercial properties, looking at that evaluation that we were talking about, where kind of what are you actually earning on that property versus what it could save you, those kind of assessments. They'll be looking at our governance procedures and how tightly we're controlling our expenditure, what kind of decisions we're making around expenditure. So they do come in and have these conversations and make those assessments, and obviously look at the audit reports that are being produced by our external auditors and the audit reports that are being produced by our internal auditors.
So you said they do actually come in and visit and call and speak to you. It's not all done at a distance.
No.
Thank you. Can I?
Please do.
Thank you. Sorry, my next question is about page 73. It's called the Fair Funding Review 2.0. My question is when do we know when this fair funding review will be completed and will report and take action? Have we any predictor as to when it's going to be done?
So I think some of it has already sort of started to filter through. It's the constant bewilderment of local government that we are always crying out for multi-year settlements and some kind of forward-looking security on what our funding is going to be. And so it's always difficult. So I think that some elements of it have already started to come through. More are expected in the autumn. More will then be announced, obviously, close to Christmas in the same vein as usual. So I don't know the exact dates. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I could go away and find out and come back and tell you. But yeah, it's the vagary of local government funding. I think that we're looking at a situation where, even although I appreciate that it might seem like quite a considerable amount of time has passed since central government changed, but I think in reality, given the enormity of the scale of the problem and the situation that they're facing, I think they're still trying very hard to put plans in place and give local government more of a forward look on where we're going to be. And we have started to see some things come out now that have that kind of 1-2 year view rather than just single year. But yes, it's the constant peril of local government never quite knowing what your funding is going to be in the following year.
Thank you. And I'm afraid I've got one last one for this section, please. In the financial statements on page 77, there is one sentence I've highlighted which says one cause is the reduction noted within the long-term pension scheme liability. So my question is, it's very hard for me to understand how there can ever be a reduction in pension scheme liabilities.
Oh, such as the arcane magic of actuaries. So actuaries look at all of our investments. They look at the sort of general metrics for life expectancy and population growth and all of those other things, and they do things far cleverer than I could comprehend, and they calculate what the future value of your pension liability is likely to be, and lots of different factors affect that, and that's something that's done, if I'm using the term correctly, triannually. So every 3 years, they do a review of that and come back with an updated expectation of what your pension liability is. And so it's quite uncommon actually to be sitting exactly where your pension liability says that it is, but often you are kind of you are a bit behind or a bit ahead, and they will advise accordingly on what they recommend your contributions need to be. So you're looking at what they have judged, a bit like revaluing the buildings. You're looking at what they have judged your current pension liability to be versus what you have banked up over the years as in your fund. And then that affects how much you have to pay over the next 3 years according to their projections. Sorry, that was very technical and complicated, but yes, actuarial calculations, I view them as arcane magic.
Magic. Yeah. Thank you very much. So my follow-up to that is, do we actually have a West Berkshire councillor trustee on the pension scheme?
That I don't know, but I can ask the question and come back to you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I've got to, sorry, Councillor Culver?
I do have some more questions, but I'm happy to, yeah, okay, thank you. With the EFS, I know we've had discussions about this at scrutiny as well, and it's been described as not necessarily being a loan, being an accounting adjustment, et cetera, and there'll be an average interest rate. Can we get a bit more clarity? You know, is there a interest rate on the EFS? Is there a time frame over which they would anticipate that it would be repaid, and how is it going to be repaid? So maybe educate me, Councillor Cottingham, on this. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer?
Please.
So what's happened? The EFS, in reality, the money has been spent, it's been borrowed, and the current projections is it will be repaid over a 20-year period, along with MRP. So in essence, it's just like any capital borrowing, but we've already undertaken it. So we're not borrowing new money. it is stuff which we've already borrowed, and effectively, from an accounting perspective, we're deferring the payment, the release. What we're doing is we're booking £20 million worth of revenue expenditure onto the balance sheet as capital expenditure, and then we will release that over a 20-year period back into revenue. So if, want of a better word, if EFS is 10 million, we put that 10 million on the balance sheet over 20 years. That means we released £500,000 per year to pay it back from an accounting adjustment. But we've already borrowed the money. There's no additional borrowings which we will undertake.
Thank you. I've got a couple of other questions, if I may, Chairman. We did ask at the last scrutiny meeting for a bit more clarity about the financial governance arrangements internally. I think there are some extra committees that have been set up, and one of the action points was to get an organogram or something of that nature so we could understand what all of the committees are and how they interrelate. So I'm conscious that was an action from a meeting that only happened 3 weeks ago. So officers might not have had an opportunity to address that, but a bit more clarity on that financial governance, I think, would be helpful if possible.
So just as clarification, we do have weekly, bi-monthly financial review panel, but also from a budgetary control perspective, the new 151 officer, along with the new executive director for finance resources, has set up a budgetary savings panel. And just later this week, we do have adult social care reporting back. It's a bit like a star chamber. So very much going from a zero-based perspective of challenging lines of expenditure. So yeah, we do have that committee, of which Elizabeth will be attending on Thursday.
Thank you. Just one more question, if I may, Chairman. Returning to the question of the merger, have we done some work around comparing why we think Vale and South is a better option than Reading, for example, when it comes to financial matters, the various risks of the different authorities, who's got what reserves, et cetera, et cetera? Have we modelled that?
That's a very good question. And I think at the moment, as I say, we're in the process of gathering that data. And I know Shannon has said previously that that is happening once we have that data to hand. So yes, it will be part of that decision making.
Thank you.
2 of my 3 questions have been poached. The only one that's outstanding is I was slightly concerned to see in 2.1a that the council's deficit on the provision of services is 60% up on where it was last year. Should that be something we're concerned about? On page, it was right at the beginning of the report, page 69. It's gone from 25.4 million to 43.9 million.
I would have to confess, Chair, I don't know the exact calculation sitting behind that. And without seeing the calculation, it's hard to explain exactly why it's gone up that much. But we've gone from a position of balancing the budget into a position of requiring EFS. So I don't think it's surprising that the deficit on the provision of services has increased. I wonder, Chair, if I could just expand on a couple of the previous answers.
Yep, please do.
So there was a couple of bits on the EFS borrowing, and yeah, you're absolutely right, it is borrowing. It's the government gives support in the form of allowing us to borrow money, effectively capital expenditure, to support our revenue budget, which we wouldn't otherwise be allowed to do. And I think there's been a shift in government on this over the last few years. I think that if you look back, not even that many years ago, but probably 4 or 5 years ago, if you looked at councils that were declaring a section 114, which is effectively like saying we can no longer meet our liabilities, but like going into administration in the private sector, where they were given EFS support in order to carry them through while they made the changes, they were actually charged a slightly punitive interest rate on it. So they were asked to borrow from the PWLB, but they were borrowing at PWLB plus 1%, which obviously was higher than what they would normally borrow at. I think that with the number of councils now who are struggling because of rising costs and pressure in social care, because of the reduction in funding, because of the increase of other sort of statutory requirements, so that punitive element of the interest rate has actually been taken away. So now we just borrow at PWLB, not at PWLB plus 1. And I think that's in recognition of the fact that you no longer have to be kind of, you know, to coin a phrase, on the naughty step to actually be in financial difficulties as a council. And Councillor Cottingham was right, like we haven't had to borrow anything additional over and above our borrowing up till now, but that's effectively because you'll hear the term internal borrowing. So internal borrowing means that if you're given cash for other purposes and it's available to you, you would use up that cash before you go out for external borrowing, which is just sound financial sense and is encouraged by SIPFA. So effectively, we have a combination of internal and external borrowing that funds our cash flow. And that's why, even although we have that gap in our general fund that EFS is closing, we haven't had to go external borrowing for that cash yet, because we've been able to use other monies. So we still keep track that these monies have been given to us for other purposes, but we have internally borrowed them in order to mitigate that.
Simon, I think your hand's up.
Yeah, Elizabeth, on the subject of the EFS, does this level of support come with strings attached to it? I know you've touched on a few things, and so did Councillor Cottingham. Does it tie the council down in any way? And is it a last resort, for example, for want of a better phrase, is it the only shot we have at this type of loan?
Well, the answer would be it is a last resort. I don't think that any council wants to go out for EFS. If you go out for EFS, it's because you are forced because of the financial position that you have reached to go into EFS. And it doesn't come, it's not so much strings, but I think we've talked about the sort of increased level of scrutiny that we are then under from the likes of SIPFA and MHCLG. And I'm going to bring it back to how you would deal with your own situation again. If your cousin came to you and said, I need some cash because I can no longer make ends meet, and you said, okay, yep, I get it. Kind of, you know, here's some cash to tide you over. But what I want is I want you to use that cash to keep yourself afloat while you make the necessary changes to bring yourself back into budgetary balance again and make yourself viable once more. That's what you would be asking. And if you then saw that cousin using the money to take a holiday to the Bahamas, you'd be saying, hang on, how does this work? Kind of, you know, I thought you needed that to pay the rent while you kind of sorted yourself out and got into a better position. So it's much akin to that. It's not that they are then in our day-to-day decisions and saying, you need to do this, you don't need to do that, you can no longer do this, you can do that. But it's about that sort of overarching, are we bringing ourselves back into balance, and are we making the decisions that you would expect in the circumstances a council in financial difficulties to make.
So just to follow on, if you've had exceptional financial support once, does it prohibit you from asking again? Was what I was sort of alluding to. So the last resort, it's the last, I meant the last chance, really. Are you likely to go back and get it with cap in hand again if you're still paying off one last financial support loan?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to give this as my personal opinion, but I've been through asking for EFS and negotiations with MHCLG when I was at Windsor and Maidenhead, and very much the experience is that as long as you are doing the right things and going in the right direction, What the government does not want to see is councils falling over, because if a council falls over and can no longer provide those services to its residents, then the government has a bigger problem. So the government does want to support councils in that situation because it wants that council to keep going. It wants that council to keep serving its residents. But it does want to see that council start to bring itself back around into line so that it can have a balanced budget going forward and have cut its cloth, I guess, to fit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Collingham.
Thank you, Chair. So just to answer that question, from a monitoring perspective, yes, central government have taken a very close lens to what we do as a council. So they actually do watch these committee meetings, scrutiny, governance, full council, executive. They're well aware of what we do, making sure we have appropriate governance in place. There are numerous reports which we have to submit as well to central government on our own performance. They will be relying on internal audit, external audit. So it's not a free loan. They want to make sure that we are complying with best practice internal control. As we say, we're not wasting the money. We're not going all the way on holiday as such. The fact that we do have robust commissioning, we are getting best value. There's a significant amount of oversight and governance from central government over this.
Thank you. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just draw your attention to page 78, the second full paragraph there, mentions, I think I'm going to direct this to Elizabeth, Chairman, if I may, although Ian might have some Councillor Cotton might have some wise words to find my direction. There's mention of a fair funding review with regard to business rates, and I'm just wondering whether there's any indication at this stage as to what that might be and how that might affect us.
I'm going to confess I don't specifically know the answer to that. I would have to go and consult my Revs and Bounds team. Normally these are about rates resets. So we build up, oh gosh, collection fund, it's another local government anomaly. So basically, as we grow our business rates over the years, we're allowed to retain a proportion of what we have generated over and above the benchmark that they started at. And that starts to grow and you get this sort of benefit of that. So it's to your benefit to grow your business rates in your district. And the surplus that you generate, there's a proportion goes to the government and a proportion that you're allowed to retain. And every now and then they do a reset and they move that benchmark. And obviously that can have quite a big impact because all of a sudden what is judged to be a surplus that you are splitting with the government becomes smaller because that sort of benchmark has moved. And so I think that's probably what the paper is referring to. We'd be waiting to see kind of what the outcome of that might be. We do retain the services of advisors in that sort of area. We work with LG Futures and with Analyse Local, who are very recognised in the sector and have their ear to the ground and are able to help with the sort of complex projections and calculations of what changes in policy changes in things like those benchmarks are likely to do. Because it's an odd thing again. A lot of the stuff that's done by central government is done in a sort of net neutral way. So often there are winners and losers. So you retain the advice of these kind of specialists because they're looking over the whole piece and they're looking at every council and trying to estimate, well, if that one goes up, what will the impact be on that one? And so, yeah. We do have that kind of advice to help us kind of look as far forward into the future as we possibly could. But I'm very sorry, that was a very long-winded way of saying I don't specifically know the answer to your question, but we are getting as much advice and support as we can on the subject.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bennyworth. Yes, this is quite a risk to us. as a council the fair review. The current government have indicated their policy to assess council's need by deprivation. So they have made it very publicly known that they want to move monies away from more affluent councils to more deprived areas. They've identified local authorities such as Blackpool as being winners and Shire counties to be losers as well. So we've yet to get the full fair review of what that means to us. They're also indicated that they want to drive government policy regarding house building. So if you're not hitting your house building targets, there may be penalties with regard to not hitting the new target which we've been given by the Secretary of State, Angela Rayner. So yeah, it is at the moment, we're still crunching in numbers, but we don't expect there to be significantly good news.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I think.
Is everyone finished? Right. As there's no decision needed, if the committee was satisfied to note the report, I would like to move on to the last item of this evening, which is item 8, Annual Governance Statement 2024-25. And again, Elizabeth, it's you.
Hurrah!
Your evening tonight.
It really is. Not what I'd planned, but enjoyable nonetheless. So the annual governance statement, a draft of this has been published in our financial statements for 24-25, but it does have to be actually approved by the governance committee. So that's what it's come here tonight for. It looks at 4 kind of key areas, or focuses, should we say, on 4 key areas, as well as generally how we are fulfilling our requirements for governance. And the 4 key areas are financial resilience, it's very unsurprising, delivering better value report for special educational needs and disability services, and that was a particular initiative that was run to try and mitigate and reduce the deficit on the high needs block in the dedicated schools grant, which is running at, it was I think 9 million last year, got to 16 million at the end of 24-25, projected to rise to 30 million at the end of 25-26. So clearly an area of very key concern. The transformation programme and a review of senior management structures. So this report lays out the progress made on those, the ambitions for the coming year, and what we're doing with governance generally, and the committee is asked to approve it.
Members. Councillor Carville, then Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It mentions on page 86 that we're not going to include embedding senior management structures. In the final column, it says, will it be included in the 24-25 AGS? And it says no. And I was just wondering why that is, because you've just identified it as one of the 4 aspects.
Sorry, Councillor Carver, can you, which paragraph particularly are you talking to? Did you say page 86?
Yes, so in the grid at the top of page 86, embedding senior management structures, and then the final column says no. I was just wondering why we're not going to include that.
Julie.
Elizabeth, I could answer that. I think the Sarah's always sorry. I mean, Sarah's already, when she drafted this, gone through some of the comments, and this is because it's not been brought forward because it's mentioning that much work has already been undertaken. So it was of more concern in 23-24. We think we've done enough work this year, so it's not been brought forward into 24-25. I think that's what that column is saying. That line is saying.
Okay, because you said you're doing some more audit work on the top 15 jobs, and I think you said the last one's just been recruited to. So is it not the case that work is still ongoing and it hasn't quite finished yet?
It's ongoing, but I think this isn't saying the risk has gone and the work has gone. This is saying it's not one of those very, very high risks that it was in 23-24. This is highlighting those really key areas of focus and risk. And we're saying, or the AGS is saying, we're comfortable, the council is comfortable that we've done enough to reduce this of being as big concern as it was in 23-24. So it's not saying it's gone away, it's just saying it's not to the level of concern that it was.
Sorry, Elizabeth, hopefully that's all right.
Thank you, Julie. Very appreciative.
Got a couple more questions, if I may, Chairman. I was just wondering what the impact of the delivering better value jobs had been, because I think we got about £1 million towards this, and I think we created either 1 or 2 jobs, and then the idea was after that it would be embedded in business as usual. Are we measuring what the impact of those particular jobs has been?
So there was a fuller report went on this to the schools forum. And I believe those papers should be available if you wanted to have a look at them. Neil, head of education, came and gave a report to schools forum on the outcome of the DBV. So I believe that education are happy that the initiative was as successful as it could have been. And I think what they're looking at, they're saying that what it's going to allow for is cost avoidance going forward. But I think that the outcomes and their expectations of that were in the report that went to schools forum. So I think that's probably, apologies if that feels like palming you off with that answer, but there was a full report went to schools forum just a few weeks ago.
Thank you. And just a final question, if I may, Chairman. Having looked at the financial statements, I'm conscious there are 4 areas in here that say key governance areas for improvement, and a couple relate to transformation. We are looking at transformation at Resource and Places Scrutiny Committee in September, which I think will be really positive. It says in the document on page 86 about making sure there's sufficient resourcing for it, but I'm conscious that the programme is also endeavouring to save money as well. So do we have an idea of how we're going with regard to saving the money? I know one example was home to school transport, and looking at that in detail to see if some of that could be reduced, because I was told there are a lot of people who are on very long-term arrangements when it comes to home to school transport, and those needed to be gone through with a fine tooth comb. I think about 18 months ago, there was an officer who was employed to specifically look at that. So I was just wondering if you could give us an idea of what kind of savings have been made so far. Thank you.
Sure. So I can't remember specifically off the top of my head. What I do know is that in the Q1 outturn reports that we will be briefing members on in a couple of weeks, we do look at all of the savings that we were expecting across the organisation and the progress made against them. So they are all, they are ragged, interestingly, red, yellow, amber and green. Which I believe was something that was instituted some time ago, and we had to put a key in and explain because nobody quite knew what yellow meant. But yes, we've got 4 RAG ratings. We do say what savings are expected, what progress has been made against them. We are also looking at the transformation programme and what the expected outcomes of that are, and reporting against that in the report too. And you say quite rightly that the transformation programme is supposed to deliver revenue benefits, and in fact that is the key criteria of what qualifies as transformation expenditure. If you look at the guidance that the government gives around transformation expenditure, again it's the special dispensation of using capital funding to fund initiatives, but the criteria around that is quite strict in that those initiatives must deliver long-term revenue benefits. So it's not enough to just spend capital rather than revenue. You actually are investing in order to generate ongoing efficiencies and savings in services.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Culver's taken one of my questions, but I've got another one on special educational needs, please. I read in para 5.12 that the deficit on the high needs block has been growing in recent years, as we know, is only being kept outside of the council's general fund through a government accounting adjustment. And this has been extended to 2027-28. In a way, I'm not asking a question, I'm just stating that to my mind, if the government is willing to extend this arrangement, they know full well that this type of deficit is widespread throughout English councils and is unsustainable in its present form. And I'm sure I'm right in thinking we're not alone in having to look very carefully at the high needs block. The only thing I've read that cheers me is that the government are going to introduce a send reforms this autumn. So we can but hope that those reforms might make the system less broken than it is. Sorry, it's not a question. I was up on my block speaking.
Anything else, members? Sorry, what? Oh, sorry, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I know it wasn't a question, Councillor Stevenson, but I think you're right. I think it is a recognition by the government that the levels of overspend in councils are spiralling because of the pressures on the SEND budget. And again, I'll go back to capital financing costs, because even although we don't have to take that overspend against our general fund, it sits on our balance sheet as a liability that we're just kind of holding fire on. And again, always relate things back to kind of what you do at home. I would call this racking up bills on a credit card, and you don't have to pay it off yet, but it's still sitting there, and the balance on that credit card is still costing you interest. So this is money that we've had to spend that we hadn't been given. So therefore, that actually also increases our borrowing. And if you think about that spiraling up to sort of £30 million by the end of 25-26, at 5% interest, just ballpark, the interest on that annually is like 1.5 million. And that is a very real impact on our revenue budget, even although the actual balance is not having to be addressed.
Thank you.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on Councillor Culver's questions over pages 85 and 86. It's not for me to give a recommendation from this committee. However, if I was to do so, I think adopting the risk heat map in the internal audit report of Appendix F of showing why these 4 items are within the annual governance report, why they were deemed to be of high risk, what is the quantification, and the movement from year to year to say what has been the mitigation, what's work's been done to move a risk which was potentially in the red zone down into the yellow or green zone, would give, I think, the members of this committee more clarity what's been happening. And on the question of delivering transformation program, a good example is that recently we had an investor stave a request from Children's Family Services to invest transformation into the commissioning team to have additional resources, not just to look at how we're commissioning existing new children, but looking at all of the 500 or so children which we do have commissioning, sort of healthcare plans as such, making sure we are delivering better value. And to go to the question also of how we are the £1 million which we have for delivering better value, Mr. Goddard did produce a report which, most importantly, the saving numbers have been validated from central government. They're not our numbers. We haven't marked our own homework. We have followed a methodology which is stipulated by central government, which is really important, because I know from my past life of trying to identify costs prevented or costs forgone, it can become very subjective, but you need to follow a very robust methodology, which we have done from central government.
Are there any final questions? In that case, as per the recommendation in the report, it is requested that the committee approve the annual governance statement and the updated code of local governance. Can I see a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pennyworth. And a show of hands, please. Thank you. As the business of the meeting is concluded, I would like to thank all those present for their attendance, and in particular the officers, and officially close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, you've been